Marissa, Hannah, Daniel, and three others who were never supposed to cross paths. Each vanished, silenced, or left behind a trail of clues so disturbing that investigators could never fully explain them. Their stories, scattered across decades and different corners of the country, share one haunting thread. Every case feels like it should have an answer, but none ever do. What began as ordinary nights, routine jobs, or playful adventures ended in mysteries so chilling that they still echo in police files, abandoned buildings, and forgotten recordings. These are 6 of the most disturbing true crime cases you've ever heard. Marissa was 20 years old, a bright and driven student who had been driving home after finals week. The long stretch of desert highway between her college and her hometown was exhausting, so she decided to spend the night at a small, offbeat motel that catered mostly to truckers and weary travelers. The clerk remembered her clearly, describing her as polite, carrying a single backpack, and requesting a room on the second floor. Surveillance cameras captured her walking down the hall and unlocking her door at 9:47 p.m. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. When her family reported her missing the following day, police went to the motel expecting a routine case of a runaway student. What they found instead was deeply unsettling. Her car was still in the parking lot, the keys on the nightstand inside her room. The television was off, the bed had been turned down, and her shoes rested neatly against the wall. It looked like she had stepped out for a moment, yet no one could explain why the room was locked from the inside when officers arrived. The hallway cameras showed nothing unusual. No strangers lurking, no suspicious activity, and most importantly, no sign of Marissa ever leaving her room. Detectives tore the space apart, checking under the bed, inside the bathroom, even removing ceiling tiles. The room gave up no answers. Years later, a new owner began renovations. During construction, a worker broke through the bathroom wall and discovered a narrow crawl space leading into the building's ventilation system. Inside was a suffocating passage coated in decades of dust. At the end of it were long, desperate scratch marks carved into the wood. Whoever had been inside that hidden shaft had tried to claw their way out. Police could never prove it, but many believe those scratches belonged to Marissa. The old elementary school had been closed since the early 1980s, its windows boarded up and the playground rusting away in silence. Teenagers from the town often dared each other to sneak inside, treating it like a rite of passage. They came back with stories that unsettled even the bravest among them. Echoes of children's laughter, the sound of sneakers squeaking on tile floors, and the faint creak of swings moving outside when the air was completely still. At first, these stories were dismissed as overactive imaginations or the thrill of exploring a forbidden place. But soon, police began to receive reports too frequent to ignore. Officers who entered the building expecting to find vandals or squatters instead found something far stranger. Blackboards across multiple classrooms were covered in chalk drawings, each one freshly made. The figures were crude stick children with hollow circles for heads and large X's scratched where their eyes should have been. What made this discovery disturbing was that the chalk had not been manufactured in decades. When tested, it matched supplies from the very same school before its closure. The drawings resembled the work of a missing girl named Hannah, who had disappeared on her walk home from that school in 1983. Police had found her notebooks at the time, filled with the same distinct stick figures. Her case had gone cold, her body never recovered. The sudden reappearance of her style of drawings 20 years later left investigators searching for explanations that only deepened the mystery. Some officers refused to return after hearing faint voices in the gymnasium. Others swore they felt small hands brush against them in empty hallways. The building was eventually sealed off again, but every so often, townspeople claimed to see chalk dust drifting from cracks in the boarded windows, as though someone inside is still drawing. The family who bought the Oregon home in 2010 had no idea of its past. From the outside, it was an ordinary suburban house with a white picket fence and a neatly trimmed yard. They planned to renovate the basement into a recreation room, but when they began tearing down one of the walls, they uncovered something unexpected. Behind a panel of drywall was a small hidden cavity, and inside it sat a dusty cardboard box sealed with duct tape. Thinking it might contain old tools or forgotten belongings, they opened it. What they found instead left them shaken. The box was filled with VHS tapes, each labeled only with a date written in black marker. When they set up an old player and inserted the first tape, they were horrified. The footage showed empty rooms from within the very house they now owned, filmed from strange angles. The more they watched, the more they realized the cameras must have been placed behind mirrors. Someone had turned ordinary mirrors into two-way glass, silently observing every room. Most of the tapes were hours of mundane activity. People brushing their teeth, folding laundry, or eating dinner, all without knowing they were being recorded. But the final tape, dated 3 years before the family moved in, was different. It showed a woman living in the house alone, carrying out her daily routines. Halfway through, the recording ended abruptly with the sound of a door creaking open, followed by muffled footsteps. The tape cut to static and never resumed. When the family searched records, they discovered that the woman seen on the tape had been reported missing, her disappearance still unsolved. The mirrors in the house were carefully inspected, and behind 2 of them, faint smudges were found, smudges shaped like fingerprints pressed from the wrong side of the glass. The first package arrived at the small-town post office in Maine during the winter of 1992. It was neatly wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address and no name for the recipient. Inside was nothing but a cassette tape. When played, it revealed minutes of heavy, unsettling breathing, as if someone had been holding the recorder close to their mouth in complete darkness. Postal workers dismissed it as a prank, but within weeks, another package arrived. And then another. Every box was identical, always containing a single tape. Most carried only the same pattern of labored breathing, sometimes punctuated by faint humming or the creak of floorboards. None of the postmarks revealed useful information, and every attempt to trace them led nowhere. The deliveries continued for months, unnerving the entire staff. Some workers refused to handle the packages, believing whoever sent them was watching. The tone shifted when one particular tape contained something different. Instead of breathing, it captured a woman's terrified screams. The recording lasted nearly 2 minutes before cutting off into silence. That was the moment investigators realized this was no prank. They launched an official inquiry, opening dozens of old packages and searching for clues. Eventually, a forensic team traced fibers from the tape packaging back to a supplier connected with an abandoned cabin deep in the surrounding woods. When investigators entered the cabin, they found a chilling scene. In the center of the single room sat a heavy wooden chair bolted to the floor, with rusted chains attached to its arms and legs. The air was stale, carrying a faint metallic smell that suggested something terrible had happened there. The cabin had no electricity, yet dozens of spent cassette cases were scattered across the floor. Whoever had sent the packages had used this place for years. No suspect was ever identified, and the origin of the tapes remains an open mystery. The factory in Michigan was known for its long overnight shifts, the kind that kept the machines running around the clock. In 2017, one worker named Daniel began his shift like any other. At 11:02 p.m., he swiped his badge at the time clock, then walked through the main hallway toward the break room. He carried a thermos of coffee in one hand and a small lunchbox in the other. Nothing about his behavior suggested anything unusual, but Daniel never clocked out. When he failed to return home the next morning, his family reported him missing. Investigators reviewed the factory's extensive security footage. Dozens of cameras tracked nearly every corner of the building, yet the last sighting of Daniel was at 1:13 a.m. The footage showed him walking down a hallway toward the break room, but after that, he simply ceased to exist. He never appeared entering the break room, never turned around, and was never seen leaving. Detectives slowed the footage to frame-by-frame analysis. In one frame, Daniel is mid-step, visible and clear. In the very next frame, the hallway is completely empty. There was no blur, no glitch, no sign of tampering with the system. It was as though he had been erased in less than a second. The hallway itself offered no explanation. It was a straight path with no doors except the one leading to the break room. Investigators searched every inch of the building, from the machines on the factory floor to the underground utility tunnels, but Daniel had vanished without a trace. Rumors spread quickly among the workers. Some believed he had stumbled into machinery. Others whispered that the factory itself was cursed. Within a year, production slowed, and the company quietly closed the plant. To this day, the final image of Daniel walking down that hallway remains unsolved. The late-night radio program in Texas had built a reputation for taking bizarre, often unsettling anonymous calls. Listeners tuned in not just for the music and talk, but for the eerie unpredictability of what strangers might confess in the quiet hours before dawn. In 1987, one call would forever change the station's history. The voice was low, almost a whisper, claiming they had already buried 3 people in the desert. The host, used to pranksters, laughed it off and moved on. But the caller's tone was flat, emotionless, and the words carried a weight that lingered long after the call ended. Weeks later, hikers exploring a remote stretch of desert stumbled upon 3 shallow graves. Inside were human remains, each carefully positioned, each bearing no identification. Investigators matched the discovery to the eerie broadcast, and suddenly what had seemed like a joke became chilling evidence of a serial killer hiding in plain sight. The recording of the call was handed to police, but no match was ever found for the voice. The following month, the same number rang the station again. This time, the broadcast was brief. The caller spoke only 5 words. Asterisk, you'll never find the rest. Asterisk, the line cut out, and despite efforts to trace the call, the signal appeared to loop back to the station's own line, as if the call had originated from inside the building itself. The story became local legend, fueling speculation about how many victims there truly were. Some believed the killer was among the station staff, others thought the calls were pre-recorded tricks. To this day, no one knows the identity of the voice. The graves remain unsolved, and the radio station shut down years later. Its final legacy, a chilling broadcast that still circulates in recordings among true crime enthusiasts.